Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Joanne Carling Akankanay from the Philippines, and I'm privileged to moderate this session on land rights struggles of indigenous peoples. We are now celebrating the 10th anniversary of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and one of the critical issues is the issue of the recognition and respect and protection of the rights of indigenous peoples over their land, territories, and resources. But we are hearing a lot of land struggles ongoing in a lot of countries. So our panel are going to present their land struggles, and we are privileged to have speakers from the US, from Bangladesh, from Belize, and from the Philippines. So without much ado, I would like to call on our first speaker, who will be talking about the Dakota Pipeline struggle here in the U.S. May I call now on Brenda Whitebull from Lakota, U.S.
Hi, Matakiapi. My name is Brenda Whitebull. I am from the Standing Rock Sioux Nation, where the Dakota Access Pipeline has been saying for several years now that they've consulted with us, that they've been saying that we approved this pipeline to come through the unceded territories. Many times you may have heard the Fort Laramie treaties brought up, which is from the 1851 and 1868 Fort Laramie treaties, and they placed the Great Sioux Nation in the North, South Dakota, and Montana areas. And throughout those years, the treaties were implemented, and they placed us on our individual reservations. And slowly the land was starting to be bought out without our permission. Sounds familiar? And so now we have our individual reservation there, straddling North and South Dakota, we call Standing Rock. And this movement started back in August with the youth who actually pretty much started this movement. And they wanted to voice their opinion and run from Standing Rock to Washington, D.C. Well, actually, they ran down to Iowa, to the Army Corps of Engineer, the general, and make a statement there to him. And then they had enough energy to continue on to Washington, D.C. and make us another statement there to the president. And that's how this part of the movement began. But Dakota Access Pipeline has been, in and out of our reservation within the last couple of years. But we have never consulted. We have never agreed upon them coming in to do what they're doing without our permission. And that's what we're fighting for. The head of the Black Snake is in North Dakota, and it straddles through South Dakota and ending in Iowa. And the area where the actual site where it's going down into the Missouri River is not even a mile, 500 yards or so away from Standing Rock. Well, people forget that the original plans to build this pipeline was further up, which is Bismarck, North Dakota, which is off the reservation. So when they originally thought of to build this pipeline, it was originally north of Bismarck. But the city of Bismarck fought to not build that pipeline to go above their city, because they were fighting for the same reasons we are. Because it's not if the pipeline will break, but when it will break. So that was their fight, and they won just like that. But we as indigenous peoples down there are fighting for that same right, saying not if, but when this pipeline is going to break. And also, speaking with the land, they've desecrated numerous sacred sites in that area where they're digging. Yeah. Burial sites, our ancestors are buried there.
Yeah. I think that's a very critical issue that we're facing, because we're not only talking of the physical land, but also the implication of this kind of activities to our own culture and well-being. But can you provide what's the status now of the project? Is it proceeding, and what actions are you planning to do?
Right now, as far as I remember and concerned about, is the Dakota Access Pipeline. Right now, the fossil fuels are not going through yet. I think they're having some complications with it. So it was supposed to have scheduled at the beginning of March to start flowing through. But for whatever complications they're having, it's not following through. So we've done our part, and I bring it back to the spiritual sense, is our ancestors told us that we do our part, maintain in spirit and prayer. And our ancestors tell us that we will do our part. And perhaps that's why what's going on is not flowing right now. We believe that we're very spiritual people. And that's what we believe, that they are taking care of us right now.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. Now we move on to another country also facing a serious problem on land. I may call on Bidayak Chakma from the Chittagong Hill Tracts in Bangladesh to tell us what are the key issues you're facing in relation to your land rights.
Jojo, I'm Bidayak Chakma from Chittagong Hill Tracts. Okay, so thanks, John. In terms of land rights, actually, like others, sisters and brothers around the world, the indigenous people around the world, the slogan, popular slogan, land is life, is also applicable for us. And over there, actually, connecting to land rights here, there are lots of issues. We can divide actually the situation in the plain and then Chittagong Hill Tracts, the hilly area of the country. Especially in our hilly Chittagong Hill Tracts, the land rights issues actually also link with issue of some militarization and also settlement. If we just look back the history, the land rights struggle of the indigenous Jumbo people in Chittagong Hill Tracts, you will say in British period it was colonized. Then 1/4 of the land, total land, actually they declared as a reserve forest. That is still in the hand of the current government. So it's not it. That is our community land was colonized, then just declared as a reserve forest. And day by day, actually, a current government also are declaring our community land as a reserve forest. So we are losing this way. And another blow was on the in terms of rights, land rights, was during Pakistan period. It was the construction of Kaptai hydroelectric project, With the Kaptai Dam, 40% of our first class actually arable land was submerged in the dam waters. And still the Kaptai Lake is there. So we lost our most very important lands in the Kaptai Dam. And now, after the liberation of Bangladesh, after 1971, in late 70s and early 80s, Bangladesh government did is more than 500,000 actually Bengali settlers relocated from the plain to our indigenous Jumma lands. So over there is still the confusion and also tension with land. And of course, and where there is land, then ultimately, Chittagong Hill Tracts is now one of the heavily militarized region of the world. So over there, military is there. So the Bengali settlers are there, and this way actually we are now in a very critical situation in terms of rights. Yeah.
I know that because of your long struggle and demand for the recognition of your land, a Land Commission Act for the Chittagong Hill Tracts has been adopted. Can you talk more about this, if this is going to address your problems?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, to just have a political solution of the total situation of the Chittagong Hill Tracts of the indigenous Jumbo people, we did sign the Chittagong Hill Tracts Accord, that's popularly known as 1997. But unfortunately, it actually just remained unimplemented. The most part of the Chittagong Hill Tracts Accord actually remain unimplemented. And what the crucial core parts of the Accord is as a land commission, the resolution of land problem. In terms of land rights, actually, in GST Accord, we did one side that is control over the land, and another one is to resolution, just get back the land that's lost by the indigenous people. So to get back the land, we must implement the part of the Land Commission Act. In terms of Land Commission Act, again, it was passed actually in 2001, but there's lots of shortcomings. Then we actually demanded for amendment. And finally, last year, actually, government did it. But again, the challenge is Bangladesh government is not passing the rules of business and also adequate allocation of the fund and also human resources, you know. That's why it still is a big challenge in terms of implementation this commission.
Okay, thank you, Bidayak. Now we go to another part. We are more or less covering a global issue of land rights. So we now proceed to Belize with Christina. She's a Kechimaya. Can you talk about also I know that you have presented your case in court and made use of the national system to address your issue of land. So can you talk more about this?
Christina Belize. I bring you greetings from my people. It is an honor to be here to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And as we're hearing today, you know, it's important to recognize that while these instruments are there to help us to achieve our dream of autonomy and our dream of full recognition of our rights to our lands and resources, the problem comes with the implementation. In Belize, for the first time, a domestic court has adopted and upheld the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And in 2015, April of 2015, 2 years ago, we won rights to our lands in at the Caribbean Court of Justice. And there was the full affirmation of our rights to our lands and territories. A very clear order was given by the court to clearly define, delimit, demarcate the territories of our lands. And one of the things that we find is that despite that ruling, that significant ruling, we continue to have infractions on our lands. We continue to have violations of the very rights that was upheld by this court. And the government continues to be very dismissive of this significant ruling. So the implementation is where we find ourselves struggling. And we're very grateful to the Caribbean Court of Justice, who has maintained supervisory monitoring of this decision, looking to see if it is in fact going to be implemented. And we're encouraged to see that, because normally when a decision is given, when it's handed down, the court removes itself from that process. But the court continues to monitor. So there is some hope in the implementation.
Yeah, Christina, can you tell us what are the threats that you're facing right now in terms of your land?
Okay, well, there are a multitude of threats. I mean, there are extractive companies coming onto our lands, oil being a big one. Oil companies, U.S. Capital Energy continues to shadow and want to come onto our lands. We have numerous logging concessions that are being granted. We actually have both state and non-state or third parties taking away lands from the communities without their free, prior, informed consent, and establishing infrastructure on it without any regard for the impacts and without any regard for the decision that has affirmed that we have rights to those lands and resources.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you, Christina. It seems like if you look at all the struggles on land, one major issue is the extractive industry. We can see that from the Dakota pipeline, but also in the case of Belize, and then the issue of militarization. I think is a critical issue. The dams, also in the case of Bangladesh, but also the conservation, as you said, the forest conservation area that was declared, and it was a form of land grab. I think so. With these serious issues that we are facing, which is also affecting our dignity, our culture, our well-being, what do you think we can do to address the problems that we are facing in relation to land rights? If you can quickly respond, and then I'll call Georgie later. So, Any of you wants to?
Maybe if I can
Yeah,
go,
you can start.
I think one of the things that we have to recognize is that the international community has to have a greater presence in countries like Belize, where we have seen some progress, but we need to continue to emphasize and raise awareness around the lack of implementation and challenge the states that have right at their forefoot, the ability to really turn this into a positive situation. So I think that a greater international presence, a greater international audience and view on what's going on is important.
Okay, thank you, Christina. Bidayak, you want to add?
Yeah, I just I just endorse our friend from Belize. Actually, there's similar things. Yeah, because we're here. I mean, the UN, the UN, the bodies, covering whole international communities as a state and non-state stakeholder over here. So I think that's same, especially in Bangladesh. In terms of our UN RIP, when it was actually being adopted, Bangladesh was one of the countries that abstained from voting in the adoption. And unfortunately, while we are now celebrating 10 years of the adoption of the UN RIP, Bangladesh government has actually failed to endorse the document yet. So I would like to also request to encourage the Bangladesh government, the international community, to encourage Bangladesh government to endorse our entry, as well as to respect the land rights and other rights of indigenous people.
Okay, thank you, Bidayak. Brenda, what?
I would just say that, of course, bringing awareness, maintaining awareness, and then keeping that consistency. One of the proposals or recommendations we recommended yesterday was actually the study. The UN do the studies, and the violence that's being done, not only to the land, but to the women, to the children, and those were being affected that way. And those studies be reported annually. We don't have 5 years from now to wait for studies. By then we've lost so many people in the land. We don't have time for that. We have to act now, and we can't wait. Yes. Now is the time. We have to come together. And Standing Rock brought so many people together and given that energy and brought throughout the world. And we have to come together and continue and maintain to fight and help each other out. It doesn't stop. We got to keep going.
Yeah, thanks, Brenda, for bringing that out, that we really need to come together to address the problem of our land struggles. And it's clear that in a lot of cases, we cannot do it alone, but we need also the support of others. So with that note, I want to call on Joji to share to us the global call to action on land rights. Joji, can you describe to us a bit this campaign on land rights now?
Yes, I'd like to acknowledge and hear all of the struggles that have been presented, because this is the struggle of indigenous peoples and local communities everywhere. And just as you have come together in Standing Rock and in your countries, really we need greater solidarity, a strong sense of unity, and coming together and building a land rights movement globally, in order to really push to get the recognition of our lands and to support our struggles on the ground. Therefore, a global campaign has been launched. It's called Land Rights Now Campaign. And this is a solidarity movement to communicate, to mobilize, to advocate, and also to take direct actions to make sure that we are able to live on our lands, and also to get the legal recognition that is required of governments. Because this is an international obligation of governments to legally recognize our lands, to demarcate them, and give us the security in our lands. Because only from that type of security can we really move forward and make our massive contributions as peoples. So this is now recognized in several global agendas. The Paris Agreement requires indigenous peoples' action for mitigation and adaptation. The Sustainable Development Goals that says they will not leave anyone behind unless there is a strong partnership and solidarity also with indigenous peoples. Then we will repeat the same failures of past development projects, but also our own self-development plans, our own visions of our well-being will only be secure if we are secure in our land's territories and resources. Therefore, the Land Rights Now campaign is to support our local struggles, but to build this big global voice, to influence governments, to reach out to media, and to say, land rights now is the most important demand for us. It's our ask so that we can secure our futures.
Okay, thank you, Georgie. That's a very comprehensive presentation of the call to action on land rights now. And I hope our listeners are taking this, and you can visit the website. There's also a lot of materials already out there describing the situation on land rights across the world. Now, because of time, may I ask you to have, what's your message for the people that are gathered here in the permanent forum? What do you want them to remember on the issue of land rights? Can you quickly?
For us in Belize, for the Maya people, it's important to understand and recognize that the same states that have denied you your rights to your lands and resources for generations will not all of a sudden change their mind and begin to respect that or begin to adopt measures that will protect your rights. So it is our responsibility as Indigenous people to protect those rights and to also deliberately and intentionally develop the very resources that we've been protecting so that we begin to implement, we begin to create our own sustainable development goals. What is our future going to look like? How are we going to carve that out? And the starting point is land rights, the affirmation and respect of our rights to our lands and territories and the resources there. But we have to take proactive measures as Indigenous people to create a situation where our people are defining our own development. And in Belize, I'm very excited to share that we've just launched the Maya Economies initiative, which is to look at deliberately developing our culture, our heritage, and our resources in Belize.
Thank you for that strong message, Christina. Can we, Bidea? Or, okay, Brenda, go ahead, please.
I could say well, actually, the first point I wanted to make was to leave with continue to fight for your lands and continue to fight for the lands that we lost, whether it be on land and or in water in our case, because we still have burial sites. That's still our land under the Missouri River because they flooded us out back in the 1950s. The Army Corps of Engineers, this is our second time dealing with them again. So they not only flooded us out, that land is still our territory. So we have to still fight for those lands, those unceded territories that they took away from us. Maintain, that's ours. Maintain that right. And then that self-sustainability. Use the land more wisely. It provides us our needs, our foods, our everything that we need to do every day. So build more gardens. Be the example that we need around the world to see.
Thank you, Brenda. Bidea?
Yeah, thank you. Just endorsing other friends over here were saying about the land rights for the indigenous people across the globe. So in terms of our GST, Chidung in Bangladesh, very briefly, I say land rights and other issues are involved. This can be only solved through our implementation with the implementation of the GST Accord. So I would like to encourage through this sitting to encourage international community to encourage Bangladesh to implement the GST Accord, as particularly to focusing to make effective or the functional the Land Commission Act. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Georgie?
Yes, because we're here at the United Nations, I think we need to underline to the governments who are making these commitments, especially now that we're looking at the 10th year to celebrate the adoption of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, that a lot of the problems that need to be solved locally, nationally, and globally are actually centrally in the hands now of indigenous peoples. That we will do all our efforts on the ground, but governments also need to make true their commitment to uphold the rights of indigenous peoples. And we need to seriously address land rights in each of the countries of the world where indigenous peoples and local communities continue to be denied our rights.
Okay, thank you to all our panelists. So just to conclude on this session, I believe the messages are clear in terms of what we need to do as indigenous peoples, that we need to defend, protect, and sustain our land and resources as part of our well-being, as part of our development, that we define how our resources are going to be used, and also that the governments should be made to account for respecting our rights, and they need to respect our rights on our land, because that is critical for our existence as distinct peoples, that is critical for our dignity as peoples. And finally, that we need greater solidarity amongst us and also among others that are willing to support our struggle and be with us in this journey. So thank you to all our panelists, and thank you to all our listeners.